Today's story begins with a phone call. It's the story of how a call from my ex-mother-in-law, 3 months after my divorce, shook my life to its core and put everything that belonged to a horrendous past back in its place. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, the ringing of the phone broke the silence. I was sitting on my balcony with a cup of warm chamomile tea with honey in my hands, lost in the pages of a book I had left half-read. It was a sense of peace so unfamiliar that I hadn't dared to dream of it for the past 5 years. My phone screen lit up, showing an unknown but chillingly familiar number. I frowned, hesitated for a moment, and swiped to answer. Hello? On the other end of the line, a sharp, nervous woman's voice struck my eardrums, mixed with the sound of ambulance sirens and people shouting, "Sophia! You need to come to Mount Sinai Hospital right now! Mark's been in a car accident. It's very serious. The doctor says they have to operate immediately, but we need $35,000 for the deposit. Bring the money, quickly, and save your husband. If you don't hurry, it'll be too late." I froze for a moment. That voice, that arrogant, commanding voice, I would recognize it even if I were turned to ash. It was my ex-mother-in-law, Carol. But wait, your husband? What is she talking about? I set my teacup down on the table with a soft clink. I took a deep breath, hoping the gentle scent of chamomile would calm my heart, which was pounding from the shock. And then I let out a laugh, a light laugh, tinged with mockery but loaded with a contempt that reached the heavens. "Excuse me, I think you have the wrong number," I replied, my voice so calm it was icy. "Or perhaps your age is starting to affect your memory." There was a pause on the other end, and then an even louder shriek erupted, as if trying to shatter the phone's speaker. "What are you saying? I'm your mother-in-law, Mark's mother. Your husband is bleeding out in the emergency room. You're his wife, so get the money and save him. $35,000. The figure that rolled off her tongue sounded as light as a feather. Did she think I was a money-printing machine? Or did she still think I was the same naive, downtrodden Sophia from 3 months ago? I stood up and walked to the railing, watching the people bustling below. The evening breeze stirred my hair. I smelled the scent of freedom, a freedom won with blood and tears. "Carol," I said, calling her by her name, no longer using the old title of mother-in-law, "I think you should start taking some vitamins for your memory. It's been 3 months since the judge finalized the divorce decree. Your son, Mr. Mark Thompson, and I are nothing to each other anymore. Why should I care if he lives or dies, has an accident, or is sick, for you to demand I bring you $35,000? By what right? And who are you to ask me?" On the other end, her ragged breathing was clearly audible. She must have been in shock, perhaps surprised that her submissive ex-daughter-in-law dared to talk back, or by my coldness, or perhaps because she was realizing that her illusory authority had vanished like a soap bubble. How dare you speak to me like that? You shared a bed for years, after all. There's an affection between you. He's my son. Can you really watch him die without flinching? You heartless woman. "I'm going to tell everyone your true colors," she began, with her usual string of threats and emotional blackmail. I smiled. Now it was a smile tinged with the bitterness of the past. "Affection? You dare mention that word to me? Did you think of affection on that stormy night when you and your son threw me out of the house? Did you think of affection when your son beat me until my face was covered in bruises for defending that young mistress of his? Did you think of affection during the divorce proceedings, when you encouraged him to hide all the assets so I would leave with nothing but my young daughter?" I paused, swallowing the bitter lump forming in my throat. It seemed the wounds in my heart, which I thought had healed, were bleeding again under her prodding. But it didn't hurt anymore. It just seemed ridiculous. "Carol, I heard your son is about to get married again, isn't he? To that Valerie, so beautiful and capable. They say she's from a good family and is carrying the male heir you both so desperately wanted. Why don't you call her? She has plenty of money. Ask her to bring the money to save her future husband. Don't make a fool of yourself by calling the ex-wife." The other end of the line went silent. All I could hear was her ragged breathing and the chaotic noise of the hospital. I must have hit a nerve. Something must have happened with that magnificent future daughter-in-law for her to swallow her pride and call me, someone she considered trash. "Valerie, that girl. Carol's voice suddenly broke, losing all its force and arrogance. "That girl has disappeared with all the money. I'm begging you. Please, just this once, save Mark. I'm begging you." "I'm sorry, but I'm neither a saint nor a charity bank. That $35,000 is for raising my daughter. Yes, the same granddaughter you once called a useless girl. I'm hanging up now." I firmly pressed the end call button. The screen went black, and the finality of it seemed to sever the last tie that bound me to that hellish family. I sank back into my chair. My hands were still trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the long-suppressed anger that was now surfacing. Only 3 months since I walked out of that mansion's door. They must have thought I'd be languishing in some miserable little room, that I'd come crawling back on my knees to beg for their affection. But life is unpredictable. The Sophia of today was no longer the Sophia of yesterday, and Mark, the man who betrayed me for another woman, now lay there waiting for death, abandoned by that very same mistress, Karma. It sounds like an ethereal word, but could any other word manifest itself more clearly and cruelly in reality at this moment? I took a sip of my tea. The sweetness of the honey and the slight bitterness of the brew mixed on my tongue. I remembered the day, 5 years ago, when I first stepped into Carol's house as her daughter-in-law. Back then, I too naively believed in the word family. I dedicated my whole heart, my money, and my youth to that home. And what did I get in return? A vile betrayal and a cruel calculation that chilled me to the bone. Can you believe it? I, who earned $10,000 a month, had to hand over my entire bank account to my mother-in-law, and every morning I received a mere $20 for groceries. A wife who gave everything for her husband didn't realize he was secretly cheating on her for 2 years inside that very house. And the height of shamelessness, they tried to sell me out to get money to support the mistress. My life story, my marriage filled with tears, and my dazzling transformation to get my revenge in the most civilized way, has only just begun. What Carol just said on the phone is merely the tip of a gigantic iceberg. How did Mark end up in this situation? What is the true identity of the mistress, Valerie, and what did I do to open their eyes? The cup on the table had long since cooled, but the bitter aftertaste of the call still lingered on my tongue, in every corner of my memory. I closed my eyes and surrendered to the evening breeze. Time rewound 5 years, to the day when I, at 25, full of faith in love and vitality, happily entered Carol's house, dressed in a pristine wedding gown. That day, everyone said I had married well. My then-husband, Mark, looked intellectual and gentle, the only son of a family with a spacious townhouse on the Upper East Side. I, though from a small town upstate, had graduated with honors from a prestigious university and worked as a marketing manager with a salary everyone envied. But in the eyes of my in-laws, I was nothing more than an outsider. But as they say, looks can be deceiving. That seemingly perfect house was actually a suffocating prison that trapped my youth and freedom. On our wedding night, before we had even unwrapped the gifts, Carol called me into the living room. Sitting in an ornate wooden chair, she handed me a paper full of family rules with an impassive face. "Sophia, it is a great blessing that you have joined our family as a daughter-in-law. I will tell you beforehand how you are to behave. There are few of us in this house, and Mark's father passed away early, so I raised my son alone. That's why I can't stand to see my son get the short end of the stick. Starting this month, I will manage your salaries, both yours and Mark's." I was stunned and stammered, "What? But Mom, we're adults. We want to manage our own money, handle our expenses, and save." "Save what?" Carol cut me off sharply. "You young people, as soon as you have money, you spend it wildly. I'm managing it for your own good. When you have an important need, I'll give it to you. Or are you worried I'll keep it?" Mark agrees. A wife should obey her husband. I looked at my husband, hoping he would defend me, but Mark kept his head down, peeling an apple. "Just let my mom handle it, honey. She'll do a better job than you. Don't be so calculating with my mom." His words were like a bucket of cold water, but as a newlywed wanting to keep the peace, I swallowed my tears and handed over my bank account. And that was the beginning of my transformation into a high-class, unpaid servant. Every morning, before going to work, I had to wake up at dawn to clean the spacious 4-story townhouse and go to the market to prepare breakfast. Carol was very demanding. The beef stew had to be made with a bone broth that had simmered overnight, and the vegetables had to be washed leaf by leaf. Then I would rush to catch the subway to my company, where I worked frantically under the pressure of being a team leader. In the afternoon, when my colleagues suggested going to a spa or a coffee shop, I had to rush home to be on time for dinner. Mark, upon returning from work, would sit on the couch with his legs crossed, watching TV, waiting for the table to be set. Carol would return from her exercise and complain about any speck of dust on the staircase or whether the soup was too bland or too salty. The most humiliating part was the money. My salary was $10,000 a month, Mark's was $5,000, and it all went into Carol's safe. Every morning, she gave me exactly $20.10 for my lunch and transportation, and the other $10 for dinner groceries for 3 people. "Manage it well and don't waste it on nonsense," she would warn, eyeing the bills as if she feared I would steal from her. $10 for dinner for 3 in an expensive city like New York. I had to rack my brain, go to the farmer's market at dawn, and haggle for a piece of fish or some vegetables. Some days, to buy a whole chicken for a good broth for my husband, I would skip lunch and fill my stomach with water to make up for the expense. Once, for the company Christmas party, I needed a dress. I opened my closet and found only old clothes from college. I mustered the courage to ask Carol for $150 for a new dress. She looked at me as if I were asking her to rob a bank. "A dress? To seduce who? You're already married, just wear anything. $150 is a month's worth of groceries for some people. Don't be so wasteful." I felt so humiliated that I ran to my room crying and complained to Mark. He, who was playing a video game, frowned in annoyance at my interruption. "Don't make such a big deal over a dress. My mom is right. Stop being so superficial. You look fine to me even in pajamas." At that moment, I realized my husband was not only spineless but also cruelly insensitive. He was used to his mother's protection and took my servitude for granted. In his eyes and his mother's, I was nothing more than a money-making machine and a domestic robot without desires or feelings. I thought about divorce then, but 2 clear lines appeared on the pregnancy test. The baby, who arrived at my most desperate moment, became the rope that tied me to that hell. I comforted myself. "Come on, hang in there a little longer for the baby. When the grandchild is born, Carol will change, and Mark will mature." But I was wrong. My silent sacrifice, far from being respected, was mercilessly trampled upon with the appearance of a third person. She entered and shattered the facade of our false family happiness. When my daughter Lucy turned 2, there was a small change in Mark's work life. He was promoted to department head. His salary didn't increase much, but dinners with clients and meetings with partners became frequent. I started to notice a strange change in my husband. Mark became more concerned about his appearance. He'd put on cologne every time he went out and, most importantly, was inseparable from his phone. He changed the password, always left it face down, and would often go out onto the balcony in the middle of the night to speak in whispers. My woman's intuition warned me of a bad omen, but every time I asked, Mark denied everything. "Stop being so suspicious. I have enough stress at work without being interrogated like a cop at home. Where am I supposed to relax?" Carol, seeing our arguments, always sided with her son. "He works himself to the bone out there to support you and your daughter, and you get jealous like a child. A jealous woman is the most foolish kind." Once again, I swallowed my anger and kept silent, until one day, while Mark was showering, I happened to see a message pop up on his lock screen. "Honey, come over tonight. I've missed you. Our baby misses his daddy, too." The sender was Valerie, secretary. I felt my world collapse. Our baby. It meant Mark had another child. With trembling hands, I secretly unlocked the phone. Luckily, I had seen him enter the password the night before. What I saw were countless sweet messages and intimate photos of Mark with a young, beautiful, and sexy woman. She was the new secretary at a partner company, and her name was Valerie. But what plunged me into despair wasn't the whispers of love, but the bank transfer records. "Honey, send me $200 for vitamins. We have to take good care of our air. Love." What a beautiful Chanel bag. It's only $3,000. Will you buy it for me? I'll ask my mom for some money and send it to you." My legs gave out. The salary I earned with the sweat of my brow and gave to my mother-in-law wasn't being saved as she claimed. She was giving it to Mark, and Mark was using it to support his mistress. An even more terrible fact was revealed as I scrolled through older messages, a conversation between Mark and his mother. "Mom, Valerie had an ultrasound. The doctor says it's 90% a boy, your grandson." "Really? Oh, what a blessing. Well done, son. Take good care of her. You have no idea how tired I was of Sophia only giving me a girl. For now, don't say anything to Sophia. When Valerie gives birth, we'll see. If you're short on money, let me know. With Sophia's salary, we can support my grandson." I dropped the phone on the bed. The thud sounded like my heart shattering into pieces. This family was an organized gang of scammers. The woman I had called mom and cooked for 5 years was an accomplice in her son's adultery. Far from stopping him, she was using the money I earned to support the fetus in his mistress's womb, all because of that antiquated and cruel patriarchal mentality. My daughter, Lucy, her own flesh and blood, had never received so much as a carton of milk or a piece of candy from her. She despised her, calling her a useless girl. But for the unborn child of a stranger, she was willing to support him even at the cost of defrauding her daughter-in-law. Hatred, rage, pain, all the negative feelings churned in my chest until I couldn't breathe. I wanted to run into the living room and rip the disgusting masks off that pair, but my business-minded rationality stopped me. If I made a scene now, what would I achieve? Mark would deny it, or worse, leave with his mistress. Carol would join him in throwing my daughter and me out onto the street. The properties were in her name or Mark's, and I didn't have a single cent. I would lose everything and start a life of hardship. Calm down. You need a plan. You have to get this rotten family out of your life and take back what is yours. I wiped my tears, put the phone back in its place, and tried to steady my breathing. Mark came out of the bathroom, whistling. I continued folding the baby's clothes, my face as serene as a lake before a storm. "Finished with your shower? Are you having dinner at home tonight?" I asked sweetly, as if I knew nothing. "No, I have to see a client with the boss tonight. I'll be late." "You two go ahead and eat," Mark said as he combed his hair and put on cologne. I now knew that cologne was for another woman. "Okay, be careful." As I watched Mark's back disappear through the door, my gentle smile faded. In its place was a sharp, focused gaze. "Enjoy yourselves as much as you can. These will be your last happy days. Now that I know the truth, the price you will pay will be higher than you can ever imagine." In the following days, I secretly began to investigate Valerie. Who was she? Why had she set her sights on a man as indecisive, modestly paid, and pretentious as Mark? And most importantly, I discovered that Mark and Carol were plotting a terrible conspiracy to take away the only property I owned, a plot of land my parents had given me. What did they plan to do with that land? And how did I manage to turn the tables and use their own scheme against them? Was the truth about the male heir and the mistress Valerie as simple as they thought? From that fateful night I discovered the secret on my husband's phone. I lived like a ghost in that house. On the outside, I was still the obedient daughter-in-law. I went to work, prepared meals. But inside, my heart had grown cold and was filled with suspicion. I knew this false peace was just the calm before a great storm. And that storm, sooner than I expected, came not from the mistress, but from the bottomless greed of a mother and son. One weekend evening, Carol, unusually, came into the kitchen herself to prepare my favorite dish, a pot roast. She served me a plate with a kindness and a smile so sweet it sent shivers down my spine. Mark, sitting beside me, was also strangely affectionate, constantly asking if my work was too hard. After dinner, Carol called us into the living room. She served tea, cleared her throat, and began. "Sophia, Mark has been doing well at work lately, and a great investment opportunity has come up with some friends to open a restaurant chain. But he's a little short on capital. So I was wondering if you could help your husband out." I took a sip of tea, hiding a smirk. "How could I help him? You manage all my salary. Where would I get any money from?" Carol hesitated for a moment, then got straight to the point. Your parents gave you that plot of land by the highway, right? I've heard its value has gone up a lot. Go to your parents and convince them to sell it. With that money, we can finance Mark's business. If your husband does well, it will be good for you in the end, won't it? Mark, beside her, chimed in, his eyes gleaming. Yes, honey, it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Sell it. I promise I'll pay you back in 2 years. When I make money, I'll buy you a piece of land twice as big. I looked at the mother and son with absolute contempt. That land was my last refuge, the property my parents had bought with their life savings for their retirement, and they dared to ask me to sell it. In reality, thanks to spying on Mark's phone and eavesdropping on Carol's calls, I already knew what business opportunity they were talking about. There was no restaurant chain. The truth was that Mark had gotten into massive debt from sports betting. The debt amounted to hundreds of thousands of dollars, and the loan sharks had threatened to break his legs if he didn't pay. On top of that, his mistress Valerie was threatening to abort her precious son if he didn't buy her a luxury condo to spend her pregnancy in comfort. Mark and Carol were between a rock and a hard place. They couldn't sell the house they lived in without losing face with the neighbors. So, they had set their sights on my only property. They intended to fleece me of my last cent, to support the mistress and pay off gambling debts. That land is in my parents' name. I have no right to sell it, I replied coolly, setting my teacup down with a decisive gesture. Carol's face hardened, her smile vanishing. Well, then you go and sweet-talk your parents. You're their only daughter. Who else are they going to give it to? Does it pain you to give it to your husband? His business is at stake. Business or a mountain of debt? I asked casually, looking directly at Mark. Mark jumped, spilling his glass of water. What nonsense are you talking about? I'm a serious businessman. What debt? All right, I said, feigning a sigh and standing up. I'll think about it. It's a big decision. I can't decide right now. I went to my room, leaving the mother and son sitting there with disgruntled faces. That night, I heard an argument coming from Carol's room. Mom, see how stubborn she is? If she doesn't sell the land, I'm dead. The lenders told me to pay up next week, and Valerie is threatening to leave. Calm down. I'll handle her. If the nice way doesn't work, we'll have to get tough. She lives in our house, and we have her daughter. Where is she going to go? If we pressure her, she'll give in eventually. Hearing those cruel words, I knew I couldn't wait any longer. They didn't see me as family, but as prey. I had to act before they did. The next day, I secretly took the day off. I gathered all my important documents and the deed to the land, which I had hidden, and placed them in a safe deposit box at the bank. To gather evidence, I installed a small hidden camera in the living room. But I never imagined their cruelty would go beyond asking for money. It was their greed and lust that brought the tragedy to its peak and led to that fateful, stormy night I will never forget. One Friday afternoon, I received a message from an unknown number. It was a photo of Mark with his arm around a woman's waist, entering a luxury hotel downtown, along with a provocative message. Hey sis, your husband is taking great care of me and our baby. You just stay home and cook, okay? The sender was none other than Valerie. She was provoking me. She wanted me to lose my temper and leave on my own, clearing the path for her to move into Carol's house. My blood boiled. I couldn't take it anymore. I left my daughter with my mother and took a cab to the address in the photo. I wasn't going to fight. I was going to end this charade with a three-way confrontation. Outside room 302, my heart pounded. I took a deep breath and knocked. Who is it? Room service, I heard Mark's voice, tinged with alcohol. The door opened. Mark, wearing only a towel around his waist, had a flushed face. Inside, Valerie, in a flimsy nightgown, was lying on the bed, stroking her slightly bulging belly with a triumphant expression. Seeing me, Mark turned pale and froze. Sophia? What are you doing here? I didn't answer. I walked into the room and stared at Valerie. She didn't seem scared at all. On the contrary, she smirked and sat up slowly. Hello, Sophia. Perfect timing. Mark just promised to buy a house for me and our baby. Mark, I said, turning to my husband, my voice trembling with contained rage. Where are you going to get the money to buy this woman a house from selling my parents' land? Or from the money you've been stealing from my salary all these years? Mark looked back and forth between Valerie and me, at a loss. Valerie pouted. Don't be so cheap. He's the precious heir of this family. What's wrong with spending a little money? I'm giving him what you couldn't, a son. You should be thanking me. Thanking you? I laughed bitterly. Thanking you? A woman who steals husbands and leeches money? You think he loves you? He's just using the child in your womb to get money from his mother, and you're only interested in his money. You two are a perfect match. Disgusting. Shut up! Mark suddenly yelled, lunging at me. How dare you insult Valerie? She's carrying my son. Your son? Are you sure it's your son? I blurted out the doubt I had been harboring. That sentence lit the fuse. Valerie started screaming and making a scene. Honey, she's cursing our baby. She wants to kill our son. Hit her. Mark, blinded by alcohol and the urge to protect his mistress, raised his hand without hesitation. A sharp slap, a burning sting on my cheek. I staggered back and fell, hitting my head on the corner of a table. Blood started to trickle down. I looked at the man I once called my husband. He stood there, fists clenched, eyes bloodshot, with no trace of remorse. Get out of here! Get out of my sight, you witch! Mark roared. I staggered to my feet, wiping the blood from my forehead. I looked at Valerie, who was smiling triumphantly, and at Mark, as fierce as a beast. It didn't matter anymore. My tears had run dry. Fine, I'm leaving. You can have this piece of trash. I hope you're happy in your filth. I ran out of the hotel and took a cab straight home. I had to talk to Carol. I held a tiny sliver of hope that, although greedy, she was still a mother and a grandmother. I thought if she knew her son had hit his wife for a mistress, some conscience might remain. But I was dead wrong. When I got home, it started to pour rain. I walked into the living room, soaked and with blood on my forehead. Carol was watching TV and was startled to see me. What happened to you? Are you crazy? What do you look like? Are you trying to shame the family? Mom, I said, my voice choked. Mark is cheating on me. He hit me. He was supporting that woman with our family's money. I expected her to be shocked and ask what happened, but no. Carol took a sip of tea without taking her eyes off the TV and said coolly, I know. I froze. You knew? She knew and did nothing. She encouraged her son to be unfaithful. Carol turned to me with a look of contempt I'll never forget. What's wrong with a man having a little fun on the side? The important thing is that Valerie is going to give us a son. She's smart and charming. What have you done for this house in all these years? Just given birth to a girl, been stingy with money, and refused to sell some land to help your husband. You are a useless daughter-in-law. Mom. Don't call me Mom. It gives me the creeps. She stood up and pointed to the door. Mark called me. He said you behaved like a shrew and insulted his girlfriend. We don't need a daughter-in-law like you in this house. If you have any decency, get out of my sight right now. That way, I can bring Valerie here. I'm not going to let my precious grandson be raised on the street. You're kicking me out in the middle of the night? I asked, trembling. Get out now, or are you going to make a scene? With that, she ran to my room, forcefully stuffed some of my clothes into an old suitcase, and threw it into the yard. Out, and don't even think about taking anything from this house. You said Lucy is with your parents? Then let her stay there. We're not raising a useless girl in this house. I stood in the middle of the yard under the cold, pouring rain. The blood from my forehead mixed with the water. My suitcase lay in a puddle. The heavy door slammed shut in front of me, severing all affection and hope. I looked up at the imposing 4-story house, the place where I had invested 5 years of my youth, cleaning every brick, cooking every meal. Now it had become a cold fortress that rejected me. That stormy night, dragging the heavy suitcase, I stumbled out of the familiar alley. I didn't look back. I knew I had just escaped from hell, sore and humiliated, but I had survived. And I swore to the heavens that those who had thrown my daughter and me out onto the street that night would pay. I took a cab back to my parents' house, hugged my daughter, and cried my heart out. After that stormy night, I returned to my parents' house, my body battered and my heart wounded. My parents, seeing their gaunt daughter and confused granddaughter, were heartbroken. My father, a peaceful man his whole life, slammed his fist on the table and yelled, Divorce him right now. Isn't there a plate of food for you and your daughter in this house? Don't have any consideration for those ungrateful people. With my parents' support, I filed for divorce the next morning. I thought it would all be over quickly, but I underestimated the cruelty of Carol and her son. For them, divorce wasn't the end of a relationship, but the last chance to fleece me of every last cent. The first mediation hearing was held in a suffocatingly tense atmosphere. Carol and Mark showed up with a lawyer and even strangers who I later learned were false witnesses. Mark, sitting across from me, had lost all the ferocity of the previous night and wore a cold, calculating expression. When the judge asked about the division of assets and custody, Mark's lawyer stood up and made an argument that left me stunned. "Your Honor, my client requests full custody of Lucy. Miss Sophia lacks the moral qualifications to be a mother. She has committed adultery, neglected her home, and currently has no stable income or fixed residence." I jumped to my feet. "That's a lie! He's the one who cheated! He has another woman and even a child with her!" Carol immediately interjected, pointing a finger at me. "Don't you shout! My son is a decent man. Who knows what kind of man you've been sleeping with while claiming to work day and night? I have proof right here." She threw a stack of blurry photos on the table, showing me having meals and coffee with a male business partner. The photos, taken secretly, were cleverly angled to look intimate. They had even hired a stranger to pose as my lover and testify that we had been seeing each other for 2 years. My blood boiled. They didn't just want to take my daughter, they wanted to destroy my reputation completely. Regarding our finances, Mark claimed that all the family's savings came from his work and that my salary was barely enough for my personal expenses. He demanded half of the land my parents gave me, claiming its value had increased thanks to his efforts as a husband. He brazenly denied that Carol had managed my entire salary for the past 5 years. I looked at Mark and Carol with a nausea rising in my throat. How could anyone be so vile? Not content with devouring my flesh, they now wanted to drink every last drop of my blood. But they had forgotten one thing. I am a businesswoman. I could endure for my family, but when cornered, I know how to fight back. I took a deep breath and signaled to my lawyer. He calmly opened his briefcase and presented the crucial evidence I had secretly gathered. First, regarding the adultery accusation, we presented security camera footage from my company, proving those meetings were for work and always in the presence of other colleagues. We also presented the recording from the hidden camera in the living room on that fateful night, where Mark admitted to having a child with Valerie and Carol's voice was heard kicking me out. The false witness, after a few questions from my lawyer, stammered, got nervous, and finally confessed he had been paid $500 to lie. Second, regarding the assets, we presented bank statements from the last 5 years. Although Carol took my salary in cash, my company direct deposited it. I showed that the regular, large cash withdrawals from my account coincided with the dates she made deposits into her savings account, of which I had also managed to secretly photograph the account statements. Most importantly, the deed to the land explicitly stated it was an exclusive gift to my daughter Sophia, notarized before the marriage. Legally, it was my separate property. Mark had no right to a single inch of it. The court, after examining the evidence, dismissed all of Mark's ridiculous claims. I was granted full custody of Lucy, and Mark was ordered to pay monthly child support. The land was recognized as my sole property. As for the savings, since I had handed them over in cash, I couldn't recover them for lack of definitive proof. I lost 5 years of salary, but I saved my daughter and my honor, and that was the greatest victory. Leaving the courthouse, Carol, pale with rage, insulted me. "Go on, consider it a donation. You think you'll do well after abandoning your husband? We'll see you live a miserable life, clinging to that girl." Mark looked at me with hatred. "You think you're so smart, but don't think you've won. Without me, you're just a divorcee with baggage. What man is going to want you?" I looked them both straight in the eye and smiled with pride. "Thank you for your concern. You should worry about your precious mistress and your wonderful son. For me, leaving that house is a blessing." I hugged my daughter and got in the car, leaving their faces, disfigured by greed and hate, behind me. The gates of hell had closed. A new world was opening up before me. Even if the road ahead was full of thorns, at least I could breathe the air of freedom. 3 months. 90 days. It's not a long time, but for someone who knows how to rise from the abyss, it's enough time to completely change their destiny. The first days after the divorce were tough. I rented a small apartment for my daughter and me, taking on the roles of both father and mother and the financial burden. At night, holding my daughter, I often soaked my pillow with tears. The betrayal of Mark and the cruelty of Carol haunted me even in my dreams. But every morning, seeing Lucy's innocent smile, I promised myself, "You cannot break. You cannot let your enemies rejoice in your misery." The sweetest revenge isn't insults or fights, but living a life 1,000 times happier and brighter than when you were with them. I threw myself into work like a madwoman. With my experience and skills, now free from domestic troubles, my focus sharpened. I landed 3 major contracts in a row for the company. I earned the recognition of my superiors and was promoted to director of marketing, doubling my salary. With the money, I started investing in myself. I cut my long, neglected hair into a chic bob. I threw out the old, baggy clothes Carol forced me to wear and replaced them with elegant power suits that highlighted my long, hidden figure. I started practicing yoga, taking care of my skin, and learning to apply light makeup. In the mirror, I saw a completely different Sophia, young, sophisticated, and full of life. My eyes, once clouded with sadness, now shone with confidence and charisma. Colleagues and men from partner companies began to look at me with admiration and approach me, but I just smiled politely. My heart needed a rest. I wanted to pour all my love into my daughter and myself. While my life grew brighter and brighter, on the other side of the city, the lives of Mark and his family began their decline. Through mutual friends, I heard vague rumors that Mark was in serious trouble. After the divorce, Mark proudly moved Valerie into his home. Carol, delighted, treated her new daughter-in-law, pregnant with the heir, like a queen, but the good times didn't last. Mark invested all his savings and borrowed money from friends to open a luxury restaurant to Valerie's taste. She envisioned a future where she would sit as the owner, merely lifting a finger to count the money. But Valerie was all style and no substance. She was ignorant and lazy. Instead of overseeing the food quality, she lavished money on extravagant decor and luxury shopping. Within 2 months of opening, the restaurant was empty. The food was bad, the staff rude, and the customers stopped coming. The capital ran out, and the interest on the bank loans and from private lenders began to crush Mark. To make matters worse, misfortune also struck his main job. Distracted by his restaurant problems and his mistress's whims, he neglected his duties and made a critical error in a major contract, causing huge losses for his company. He was reprimanded by his superiors, demoted to a junior position, and his salary was cut in half. Because of money problems, the atmosphere in Carol's 4-story townhouse became suffocating. At the dinner table, there were no longer laughs about a bright future, only sighs and arguments. Once, I ran into Mark at the supermarket. He was pushing Valerie's shopping cart. He looked haggard, with an unkempt beard and worn-out clothes. Valerie, beside him, was frowning, constantly berating him because he couldn't afford some expensive imported grapes she wanted. When he saw me, his ex-wife, in a striking red dress, high heels, a designer handbag, and laughing happily with my daughter, Mark was so shocked he dropped the carton of milk he was holding. He stared at me, his eyes a mixture of surprise, regret, and shame. I walked past him like the wind, without even a greeting. At that moment, I knew I had won. Not because I was richer than him, but because I had reclaimed the self-worth I lost when I was with him. But that was just the beginning of their family's collapse. When the money ran out, so did the love. The mistress, Valerie, whom Carol had treated like a jewel, began to show her true colors as a greedy, shameless gold digger. A new version of the mother-in-law, daughter-in-law conflict was about to erupt, and it was 100 times more terrible than anything I had experienced. While I was enjoying the glorious days of my life across the city in that 4-story house where I buried my youth, a tragicomedy was playing out daily. I didn't seek out this news. As they say, good news travels far, but bad news travels even farther. I heard it as gossip from former neighbors who detested Carol's arrogance. They said that since Valerie moved in, Carol had aged 10 years. If she had hated me before because my competence and meticulousness made her feel inferior, she was now experiencing firsthand what it meant to let a tiger into the house. Valerie, 4 months pregnant, was initially treated like gold, but she dropped her sweet and docile mask right after I was completely out of the picture. She revealed herself to be lazy, rude, and a professional con artist. She would wake up late every morning and wouldn't lift a finger to clean or cook. She wouldn't even wash her own plate. "Mom, what's for breakfast today? Beef noodle soup? I don't like that, it's too greasy. I'm craving some fresh, sushi-grade uni. I know it's expensive, but your grandson needs it. Go to that fancy grocer downtown and get me the best they have." Valerie, lying on the sofa getting a manicure, would bark orders at Carol. The same Carol who forced me to wake up at 5 a.m. to make bone broth now had to run errands for her new daughter-in-law. "Even if you're pregnant, you need to move a little," she told her resentfully. Sophia was still cleaning the house with energy right before she gave birth. Hearing my name, Valerie shot up and glared at her. "Don't you dare compare me to that small-town ex-wife of his. I am a valuable woman, carrying the precious lineage of this family. If you like her so much, call her back to serve you." "I'm tired, and I can't." Carol was speechless. No one had ever talked back to her like that. But thinking of Valerie's pregnant belly and her long-awaited grandson, she swallowed her bitterness and went out to be a servant to her daughter-in-law. Besides being lazy, Valerie was a spending machine. As Mark's business went downhill, the restaurant lost money, and debts piled up, Valerie spent money like water. Packages with cosmetics and designer bags arrived daily. Where did the money come from? Valerie relentlessly demanded it from Mark, and if he didn't give it to her, she would cry, throw a tantrum, and threaten to have an abortion or fall into a depression. Mark, infatuated with Valerie and not wanting to lose face, even borrowed from loan sharks to fund her spending. The conflict reached its peak one night when the lenders who had financed the restaurant knocked on the door to collect interest. Mark wasn't home, and Carol had to go out and humiliate herself by begging them for more time. When she returned, she found Valerie doing a live stream, showing off hundreds of dollars worth of cosmetics she had just bought. Carol snapped. She lunged at her, snatched the phone, and smashed it on the floor, screaming, "What kind of woman are you? Your husband is drowning in debt, and I have to beg creditors while you go shopping. Won't you be happy until you've ruined this family?" Valerie, seeing her phone shattered, lost her mind. She stood up and shoved Carol, who stumbled and hit her back on the corner of a table. "You crazy old woman! How dare you break my phone? The money I spend, my husband gives me. What does it have to do with you? If this house is in ruins, it's because your son is a useless fool, not because of me." Carol, clutching her aching back, stared in horror at the daughter-in-law she had once praised as smart and charming. "How dare you hit your mother-in-law? I'm kicking you out of this house." "Kick me out?" Valerie sneered, her smile twisting into a defiant grin. "Try it. I'll leave with your grandson. Let's see your family line die out. And don't forget, that restaurant, even if it's losing money, is legally in my name. If I sell it right now, who do you think loses?" Just then, Mark arrived, reeking of alcohol. Seeing his mother on the floor and his wife defiant, he rushed to separate them. "Enough! Both of you! Stop! Are you trying to kill me?" he yelled desperately. The karma had arrived all too quickly, and it struck directly at what Carol valued most, her dignity and the hope of continuing her lineage. She had thrown out a good daughter-in-law and brought in a tyrant who oppressed her. A week after that heated argument, Mark's financial situation completely collapsed. The restaurant had to close. The lenders gave him an ultimatum. If he didn't return the $35,000 principal in 3 days, they would come to Carol's house and seize their assets. Desperate, Mark remembered some money he had secretly saved when he was with me, about $40,000 he had skimmed from my salary over the years. He kept it in a personal safe in his bedroom. That night, just like the night they threw me out, it was pouring rain. Mark, tormented by the deadline, came home drunk. He stumbled into the bedroom, ready to take the money to pay off the lenders. But when he opened the door, he was met with a shocking scene. The closet was wide open, and all of Valerie's luxury clothes and bags were gone. And most terrifyingly, the small safe in the corner was open and completely empty. Not a single bill was left. Mark, thinking it was a drunken hallucination, rubbed his eyes. He frantically searched the safe, but it was empty. All his money, his lifeline, had vanished. On the dresser, only a note hastily written in red lipstick remained. "Mark, I'm sorry. I can't live this life of hardship with you. Consider this money compensation for my youth. Don't look for me. I've gone abroad. Goodbye." Mark's blood ran cold. Valerie had fled. Not only had she abandoned him, but she had taken every last cent, pushing him and his elderly mother into a dead end. "Damn you!" Mark roared like a wounded beast. Without a second thought, he grabbed his motorcycle keys and shot out of the house. "Mark, where are you going in this downpour?" Carol yelled, but she only saw her son's back disappear into the curtain of rain. Mark sped like a madman down the empty highway. Only one thought was in his head. "I have to find Valerie. I have to get the money back." He assumed she would have fled to the airport or the bus station. The rain lashed his face. Alcohol clouded his mind, and hatred blinded him. He drove recklessly, running red lights and cursing aloud. As he reached a major intersection, the light turned red, but Mark either didn't see it or didn't care. He accelerated, chasing the ghost of his betrayer. Just then, a large freight truck entered the intersection from the perpendicular road. The deafening blare of the truck's horn and the horrifying screech of brakes on wet asphalt filled the air. Boom! A terrible crash seemed to swallow even the sound of thunder. Mark's motorcycle was thrown dozens of feet, shattering into pieces. Mark, his body like a rag doll, flew through the air before landing on the cold asphalt, rolling several times and lying motionless. Red blood gushed out, mixing with the rain and staining the road. The terrified truck driver jumped from his cab. Onlookers stopped, and a murmur of voices and shouts for an ambulance filled the chaos. Mark lay there, his eyes wide, staring at the black sky. In the last moments before losing consciousness, images flashed through his mind: his ex-wife, me, laughing happily with our daughter, his elderly mother crying at the door, and Valerie, laughing on a pile of money. Everything faded into a murky darkness and a pain that pierced him to the bone. An hour later, at Mount Sinai Hospital, Carol received the call from the police and collapsed. Crying uncontrollably, she took a cab to the hospital. But there, facing the doctor, she received even more terrible news, like a lightning strike from a clear sky. That night, the emergency room was filled with the chaotic symphony of life and death. Carol was huddled in a corner, staring at the closed operating room door where her only son was fighting for his life. "Family of the patient, Mark Thompson?" a nurse asked urgently. Carol staggered to her feet. "I'm his mother. How is my son?" "The patient has massive internal bleeding and complex head trauma. We're doing everything we can, but his condition is extremely critical. We need an immediate deposit of $35,000 for blood and specialized surgical equipment. If you delay, we can't guarantee his life." $35,000. Again, that number. It was like a 1,000-pound weight on her chest. "Please, wait a moment. I'm calling someone to bring the money," Carol begged, crying. "Hurry up. Your son's life is hanging by a thread." With trembling hands, Carol took out her phone. The first person she thought of was not me, but Valerie. She dialed her number. It rang and rang, then went to voicemail. "The mobile customer you are calling is unavailable." She called again and again, 10 times, but only heard the cold, automated voice. Her messages went undelivered. Valerie had blocked her completely. It was then that she remembered Mark's words before he raced out. "She's gone. She took all the money." Carol finally understood. It was all a long-planned con. Her phone rang again. "It was the loan sharks. I heard he had an accident and is dying," a threatening voice said. "I don't care if he's in the ER or in hell. You'll have to pay. We're outside your house right now. If you don't have the $35,000 by morning, my boys will empty the house, and then we'll pay your son a visit at the hospital. Your choice. Click." Carol dropped the phone, the screen cracking. It was a dead end. Her son dying, her home about to be lost, and not a cent to her name. In her desperate, foggy mind, one name appeared like a final lifeline: Sophia. Yes, her ex-daughter-in-law. She remembered I was soft-hearted and sentimental, and most importantly, she'd heard rumors I was a director now, making more money than I could count. For someone so rich, what is $35,000? She thought, with shameless, selfish logic. After all, Mark is the father of her child. She can't just stand by and watch him die. And so, she called me. Her attempt to pressure me with her old authority, mixed with her current desperation, ended with my simple, cold rejection. When I hung up, Carol sat stunned in the hospital corridor. Her last hope had vanished. For the first time in her life, she felt a terrifying loneliness. She realized that she and her son had, with their own hands, destroyed all affection and any chance of salvation. "Sophia, I was wrong," she murmured, but her late repentance was heard only by the sterile hospital walls. However, Carol didn't expect that on the other end of the line, I, who had hung up the phone, wouldn't just sit back. I sat in my living room, staring at the dark screen. The tea had gone cold, but my heart was burning. Not with worry for Mark, but with a complex mix of emotions. I had told Carol I didn't care, but deep down, I felt a morbid curiosity, a desire to see the end of the tragic movie they had directed themselves. I wasn't going to play the role of the savior Carol hoped for. I wanted to confirm with my own eyes the price traders pay. I wanted to see the misery of those who had thrown me out onto the street. And above all, I wanted to show them clearly the position today's Sophia was in. I went to my closet. I chose an elegant, fitted black dress, a sophisticated cream-colored blazer, a designer bag, and high heels. Light, defined makeup with a touch of authoritative red on my lips. In the mirror stood a successful, confident, proud woman. "Mom, I'm going out for an errand." "Be a good girl," I said, kissing Lucy on the forehead before leaving. I drove my car through the night to Mount Sinai Hospital. The sound of my heels echoed authoritatively on the floor. I saw Carol from a distance, huddled in a chair, looking so small and pathetic I almost mistook her for a homeless person. I stopped in front of her. My shadow fell over her. She slowly looked up, her eyes swollen and lost. It took her a few seconds to recognize me. "Sophia? Is that you, Sophia? You came!" Like a drowning person grabbing a raft, she jumped up and tried to take my hand. "Did you bring the money?" "Thank God. Hurry, the doctor is pressing us." I took a gentle but firm step back, avoiding her touch as if it were something dirty. "Calm down," I said, my voice cold and emotionless. "I didn't come here to pay for anything." Her hand stopped in midair, her twisted smile vanished, and surprise and anger began to surface. "What? If you didn't bring the money, why did you come? To laugh at me?" "Yes," I replied, looking her straight in the eye with cruel sincerity. "I came to see what karma looks like in person, to see where the mother-in-law who threw her daughter-in-law's clothes onto the street on a rainy night is sitting now, and to see where the husband who beat his wife for a mistress is lying now." "You witch! You demon!" Carol shrieked, pointing at me. "He's in there dying. How can you say that, you who were his wife?" "Oh," I scoffed, "it seems you've forgotten. 3 months ago, you and yours stripped me of that title. Now I'm just a stranger. And a stranger has no obligation to save the life of the person who tried to kill her soul." I leaned in closer and whispered, so she wouldn't miss a word. "Carol, the $35,000 you need is not a large sum for me now. I could solve it with a single signature. But I won't. Do you know why?" She stared at me, dumbfounded, fear creeping into her eyes. "Because with that money, I would rather donate it to an orphanage or save stray dogs than save a traitor like your son. At least those animals, if you feed them, will wag their tails. You too bite the hand that feeds you. You, get out of here right now." Carol, choked with rage, collapsed back into her chair, clutching her chest and gasping for air. Just then, the emergency room door opened, and a doctor came out, pulling off his mask with a serious expression. "Family of the patient Mark Thompson?" Carol seemed to have no strength left to stand. I glanced at her once, then turned to the doctor. "She's his mother. How is he, doctor?" The doctor, assuming I was family, shook his head with a pitying expression. "We've managed to stop the bleeding, but the brain damage is so severe that unless a miracle occurs, it's very likely he will remain in a persistent vegetative state for the rest of his life. Furthermore, the costs for the intensive care unit will be considerable, several $100s a day. The family should prepare themselves mentally and financially. A vegetative state. The words fell like a death sentence, neither living nor dead, a soulless body lying as a lifelong burden. Hearing those words, Carol's eyes rolled back, and she fainted in her chair. I watched the chaotic scene. I saw the woman who once barked orders now collapsed and helpless, and the ICU door where Mark would soon lie, connected to tubes. I didn't feel the satisfaction I thought I would, just emptiness and a kind of pity. Pity for a life of greed and foolishness. I was about to turn away, but a cold, trembling hand suddenly grabbed my ankle. I turned in surprise. Carol had woken up and crawled on the floor to my feet. She hugged my legs, her tear-streaked face looking up at me. There was no pride or arrogance left. "Sophia, I beg you, please save my son. I was wrong. I'm a stupid old woman. I was cruel. I deserve to die. But Mark is still young. Sophia, you have the means. Have mercy and give him a chance to live again. I promise I'll pay back every penny, even if I have to beg or work as a laborer. I'll pay my debt by being your slave for life." An elderly woman, in the middle of a crowded hospital, kneeling at the feet of a young, elegant woman, banging her head on the floor. Everyone who passed by stared and whispered. I looked down at Carol. For a moment, a flicker of human compassion made me hesitate. But the reason of a woman who has suffered too much whispered, "Don't believe her. Get up." "Stop the theatrics," I said, my voice still cold but a little softer. "Pay me back? With what? You're about to lose your house, and your son is in a vegetative state. How will you pay?" I... Carol, choked with sobs, couldn't speak. "Sophia, I know you're angry with me and Mark. But we were a family. We ate at the same table for 5 years. Don't you remember? When you were a newlywed, I took you to the market by the hand. I taught you how to make that pot roast you loved so much." I let out a dry laugh. "Carol, what a selective memory you have. You remember the pot roast, but you seem to forget who had to wake up at 5 a.m. to stew the meat and wash the vegetables. You remember taking me to the market, but you don't remember yelling at me, calling me wasteful because I bought vegetables that cost $1 too much by mistake. You say we ate at the same table for 5 years? It's true. For those 5 years, I ate rice soaked in tears. Remember that table? When we had roast chicken, the thighs and wings were all for your son, and I got the neck and bones. You said a daughter-in-law had to stay thin. Have you forgotten?" Carol, speechless, lowered her head. "I was strict with you because I wanted you to grow and run the house well. There was no malice." "Don't talk to me in that condescending tone," I snapped, unable to contain my disgust. "You weren't strict, Carol. You were cruel. You exploited my labor, took my salary, despised my parents, and to top it all off, on that rainy night, you and your son threw me out like a dog, just because I wouldn't sell my parents' land to support his mistress. That cruelty isn't a lesson. It's the vile nature that runs in your bones. But the child," she pleaded, "the child Valerie is carrying is this family's blood. You're a mother too. Have pity on the innocent child." She was still playing the baby card. She didn't know that the truth about that child would be the final, fatal blow. I looked at her with a deep, profound pity for a fool. "You really want to know the truth about that male heir? Fine. I'll show you, so you can finally wake up." I opened my purse, took out my phone, and pulled up the file a private investigator had sent me 2 days earlier. I held the bright screen up to Carol's stunned face. On it were several clear photos and text message conversations. "Look closely. This is your precious daughter-in-law, Valerie, and this man is a married real estate mogul from Chicago. This photo was taken 6 months ago. 6 months ago, she was with this man. At that time, your son Mark was at home with me. Now, look at this ultrasound. The fetus is now over 22 weeks, more than 5 months along. But your son has only been with her for 3 months. Do you understand what that means?" Carol trembled, babbling. "No, it can't be. She told me she was 3 months along. She lied, I scoffed. And this message is the most interesting part. I opened a conversation between Valerie and a close friend. I'm pregnant with the fat guy's kid. He's scared of his wife and won't acknowledge it, gave me $5,000 to get an abortion. But I'm stringing along this other guy, Mark. He's an only child with a nice house, and his mom is desperate for a grandson. This guy is a spineless idiot, easy to fool. I'll make him believe he's the father. I'll get a place to live, money, and his old mom will be thrilled. Maybe she'll even kick out the wife and let me move in. After reading the message, Carol looked as if she had been struck by lightning. She collapsed, grabbing her head. Her pride, her hope for a lineage, everything she had used to justify her cruelty had shattered like a soap bubble. Her son, Mark, had been the victim of the most painful scam of his life. He betrayed his wife, abandoned his family, all to follow a depraved woman, only to find out he was going to raise another man's child. He had crashed his motorcycle chasing a con artist to get back the money he had stolen from me to give to her, all for a lie. Oh God, my son, why were you so foolish? I've ruined you, Carol wailed, a raw, heartbreaking cry of a mother realizing she had pushed her own son to his death. Do you understand now? I said, putting my phone away. This is the truth you have to face. There is no grandson, no kind daughter-in-law, only the stupidity and greed of you and your son. Sophia, save him. Even if he was a fool, he's still my son, Carol whispered, her voice barely audible. I looked at the ICU one last time. Mark deserved to be punished, but seeing him die deceived made me feel a sliver of pity. However, pity wouldn't make me carry the weight of his life again. Carol, I can't pay the $35,000. That money is my daughter's future, the future of the same granddaughter you once mistreated. But for a shred of humanity, I won't let you starve here. I took a business card from my wallet and placed it in her hand. This is the contact for a charity that helps seriously injured accident patients. My company is a frequent sponsor. I will call and ask them to review Mark's case. With luck, they may be able to cover a portion of the hospital bills. The rest, you will have to figure out yourself. Sell the house, sell some land, take out a loan. That's your business. This is as far as I can help. With that, I turned and walked away decisively. Behind me, I heard Carol's voice calling, Sophia, I'm sorry. I truly regret it, but I didn't stop. As I stepped out of the hospital doors, a cold night wind blew, but strangely, my heart felt warm. I hadn't taken revenge by letting them die, but I hadn't been foolish enough to let them use me again. I had shown them the truth, and the truth was the cruelest judgment of all. Life is fair. Mark would now face an eternal darkness, or live with a lifelong disability. That was the price of betrayal. Valerie fled with the money, but she would never live in peace with stolen funds. And Carol, the rest of her life would be a hell of regret and loneliness. And me? I looked up at the star-filled night sky. Tomorrow, I would take my daughter to school and go to work with a burning passion. I would live a brilliant, independent, and happy life. Because I deserved it. 2 years later, on a cold New Year's Eve in New York City, I stood in my office on the 20th floor, looking out at the city sparkling with lights. On my desk, a polished plaque read, Sophia Martin, Vice President. In the past 2 years, I had never stopped striving. I had bought a luxury penthouse with a skyline view and had my parents come live with me. Lucy, now in first grade at an international school, was growing up smart and beautiful. My life was filled with laughter and peace. On Christmas Eve afternoon, I drove out to buy decorations for my new home. While waiting at a red light at a busy intersection, a scene on the sidewalk made me freeze. On the cold pavement, an old woman with completely white hair, dressed in tattered clothes, was sitting on the ground. She was trying to spoon-feed a thin gruel to a man in a rickety wheelchair beside her. The man was skeletal, his hands and feet twisted, his mouth agape. His empty eyes stared into nothingness, and drool soaked the dirty bib on his chest. Though time and hardship had left them in a miserable state, I instantly recognized them, Carol and Mark. Mark hadn't died. The operation had saved his life, but the severe brain damage left him paralyzed and nonverbal, living like a vegetable. He had become a child in a man's body. And Carol, after selling the townhouse at a loss to pay off debts and medical bills, was left with nothing. The arrogant, authoritarian mother-in-law had now become the lifelong servant to her disabled son. "Eat, honey, just one more spoonful, please," Carol begged in a hoarse, tearful voice. As she brought the spoon to his mouth, he had a slight seizure and knocked the bowl over, splattering them both. Carol broke down, sobbing. "Oh God, why is my life so hard? I wish you had died then. It would have been a relief. That Valerie, damn her, she ruined us." Mark just made nonsensical sounds, tears streaming from his soulless eyes. Perhaps deep in his shattered subconscious, he still felt pain and regret, but he was trapped in the prison of his own body, forced to watch his elderly mother suffer every day because of him. It was a punishment more terrible than death. Seeing them, I no longer felt hatred, only a sadness for the fleeting nature of life. I had heard a rumor that Valerie, after fleeing with the money, was found by her mogul lover, who took everything back, and she now lived miserably in hiding. Truly, you reap what you sow. They had once tried to take everything from me, but in the end, their own greed and malice plunged them into an abyss from which they could never escape. The light turned green. I rolled up the window and pressed the accelerator. The car glided forward, leaving the image of that miserable pair behind in the bustling crowd. I didn't stop to give them money, nor did I get out to humiliate them again. My silence and my departure were the clearest answer. We now belonged to different worlds. I drove home. There, my parents and my daughter were waiting for me for Christmas Eve dinner. As I reached the door, Lucy ran out and hugged me. "Mommy, you're here! Grandpa and Grandma were waiting for you for soup." I hugged my daughter, smelled the scent of her hair, and felt the warmth of family spread through me. "I'm here, my love." Seeing the Christmas table filled with laughter, my healthy parents, and my wonderful daughter, I smiled, content. This was true happiness, a happiness built not on calculation and deceit, but on true love, effort, and kindness.